All right, everyone else is already farming pirate software. He's a game developer who's also a pretty big YouTuber and content creator, like live streamer. I think that's pretty cool. And he has some extra insights to the what's the word I'm looking for? The initiative to stop killing games. It's a European initiative currently, but if it works out in Europe, they want it to be able to spread to the rest of the world, right? Because it changes the way that games have to be developed if they're going to be released in a region like Europe. I think the worst thing to think about is, I mean, if they really want to kill their game, they'll just not release it in Europe, duh, right? But uh, let's hear what the actual reasonable things are because I'm like a cynic. I think that whatever's bad that someone can do, they will do. I'm just that guy. But there's probably way more in-depth things that we can learn by listening to these two videos. There's two, and reacting along. Let's see what we got.
Hi, my name is Jason Thor Hall, also known as Pirate Software Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive community. We've got about 180,000 people in Discord, and
Damn.
most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way. It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. And it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this. So with that in mind, that community brought me this and tried to get me to sign it. And I don't want to. Number one, I can't because I don't live in Europe. But number two, I wouldn't sign it even if I could. And I'm going to kind of go through this and try to explain the reasoning as to
When I heard this guy didn't like the initiative, I was really surprised because he seems like the kind of person who really likes the freedom of game development and wants games to be created at their fullest. But like, look at what he's got all this stuff open. He did a bunch of research and all that. He's even got the Steam database open for the game. I think he already did some prior research right as he got this to double check to make sure he knew what he was talking about. He seems like a logical, reasonable guy whenever I hear any of his other clips when it comes to pirating games, when it comes to game development, when it comes to abandonware, things like that. So let's see.
That would be the case without all of the internet hate machine that's grown up around it. So let's go into how this works and why this is an issue to me. First things first, what is an initiative? So an initiative is actually not law. It is something that you put together so you can put it up in front of representatives and they can start the conversation. The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why is specifically on this initiative, under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher.
I already hate that. I never even read it. I had no idea. I heard about the initiative and I was like, oh, that's cool. Because it all started about the crew, right? Because the crew was shut down after it had 12 million sales, not 12 million players. There wasn't 12 million people still in the game. Casual normies moved on to the crew too. Let's stop trying to spin this and make it seem as if there was 12 million people actively playing the crew and they shut the servers off. No, they clearly shut the servers off because the game wasn't as popular anymore. Maybe the licenses ran out for the licensed vehicles, right? We never really had to deal with that for old games because old games you just bought the fucking disc. That's like if you had the license for the music for something like Tony Hawk for 10 years for the first Tony Hawk game, second Tony Hawk game, you didn't need to renew the license because it's not like the game kept going after 10 years. That's why those games a lot of times are pulled from storefronts. Things like Mortal Kombat 9 got pulled because the license for Freddy Krueger probably ran out. The license for Kratos might have ran out. Duh, like these are extremely obvious. Soul Calibur 4, maybe the license for Yoda, Darth Vader, and Starkiller ran out. Duh, like I know that, and I'm not a game developer. I'm not in the industry at all. I'm just some normal fucking guy, halfway normal guy. I stream on Twitch. I can't be that normal. Now, I don't like this because when you look at the way that works, it says licensed or sold. If a game is sold, very different. It should be left in a playable state because you bought it, right? I think something like Battleborn is a perfect example. How you could buy Battleborn on a disc, but it was still online only. You bought the disc for Battleborn, but it worked as if it was a license to play the game, the live service game, online. Because the only way to get into the single player or multiplayer local proponent of the game was to play online. You had to have an online connection. That I didn't think was good. That like Battleborn was a game that I think if at least the single player stuff was still alive, the game would be really cool because you'd just be able to play the single player mode, you'd be able to play the story, like the levels, and that's pretty cool. And it would leave the game in somewhat of a functioning state, but instead the whole game is just completely ripped from the internet unless you want to go into modding and all that stuff. And that is one of those times where I'm like, okay, yeah, I would love this initiative. Now, then you think on the other hand, where a game is completely built from the ground up to be live service and online only, something like a Rumbleverse, a RuneScape, like an online MMORPG, a digital card game, right? Games like this where they're built to be online only, and they're built to be in an ecosystem that is developed by the publisher or developer, and it makes sense for it to only be cohesive and function online. That's you can't to leave that in a functioning state. There's two things: either A, the game is going to be hobbling along limping, and someone is going to be creating a version of the game that doesn't even feel like the best version anymore, or B, the creators had to release all the source code, and that source code might have been licensed to them, or the source code could be some sort of patent that they created that they want to keep in-house to make their next live service or online only game. And then at that point, you know their patent. And what? No, like those are trade secrets. Those are industry secrets usually, which I think are a good thing. Like that's why game development studios are as big as they are.
This isn't always possible in all video games, and it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games.
That's fair.
How would you
it is
keep
vague.
League of Legends in a functional playable state? You'd have to re-architect the entire game. The game is what is called client server.
Yeah.
So in client
that's why I said something like RuneScape.
There's a server and there's a client, and
they
all
ping
of
each other all the time.
Game, everything happens on the server.
And then it bounces to the yep.
And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do a billion damage.
Mm-hmm.
You don't trust the client. You trust the server. The client just displays what it's told, right? So if we wanted to re-architect this, we'd have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multiplayer-only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say like, oh, that'll get worked out down the line. But we're dealing with government here. If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas, specific
Knockout City is going to pop up in this conversation later. I think that the game died. They released the source code and made it so that people could host their own servers to play the game. Yeah, that's what I heard, which is cool. But maybe it had decoupled logic. Maybe it wasn't server client. No, yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues, especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense with people that may not understand the nuance of our industry, all in the name of saving games. I can't agree with that. So let's go into why this is happening, right? So why did this start in the first place? What is the specific cases they've called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's the crew. So action on
I think they should call out Battleborn.
Published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long.
That's disingenuous. Yeah.
There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing it anymore.
Yeah, that's how it works.
If there's any costs associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and hide it.
Yeah, that's not okay.
Do that.
Right? Like I don't like. I'm sure in the TOS or in the EULA in Battleborn, they had good lawyers, and I'm sure the studio 2K behind it, 2K and Gearbox made it known that when you bought the game, it was a license, right? Even though you have a physical disc, it was a license. You're licensed to play the game in this live service element, blah, 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 blah. Surely all of that was probably in there somewhere, right? But when you can buy a game physically, these people, most normal people assume, oh, yes, this is a physical disc. It will work forever. That's just how physical media works, right? Like, yeah, whatever, right? I get that. But if you actually read any contract ever, any contract can be voided or terminated. Any piece of media can be taken back if used in the wrong way, right? Or you could get a fine, right? Like if you buy a DVD and you rip a bunch of copies of it, it's your DVD. You have the right to do that, but it breaks the license of you owning that DVD if you read like literally just watch the part of the movie where you bought it, and it'll say that, like illegal distribution, blah 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 blah. It's all in there. It's all there.
When they do, we should be calling out that specific company, not all companies. So let's take a look at this and find out more about the crew itself. If we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that the crew was actually created in 2014,
That's
which,
kind of old.
much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's kind of old.
So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections and published by Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game, and they shut it down 10 years later. On March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game's servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for live service games. The only thing that I can see in here that could be a problem is if they posed it as not an online-only experience.
Yeah.
But everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online-only. If you're going to be buying an online-only game, that means it can only run when it's online. And if the servers need to shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut if it's online only.
Yeah, I remember having to explain that to a normal person who liked Fortnite a lot, and I was like, like a lot of online games eventually die. I was like, actually, the vast majority of online only games eventually die. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, all those skin purchases you made in Fortnite eventually. Yeah, I mean, Fortnite could just turn off. I was like, I don't see it happening anytime soon. Not for the next 15, 20 years. There's no way. The game is too popular. It holds a very healthy player base. It's got an extremely large reach and audience. Like its scope is massive, but eventually it would turn off. And he said, this is a direct quote, well, if I can't use my skins anymore, they need to pay me back. Normal people don't understand live service. Normal people don't understand one-time purchase microtransactions in video games. They can't help you. They don't.
Only. If it's a single player experience that has online only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I'd agree with you.
Yeah.
That's a shitty business practice.
Mhm.
But that's really rare. And in the specific cases where it does happen, we should call out that, not just all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. The Crew itself came out in 2014, but it actually had a sequel that
The
came
Crew
out
2.
in 2018. And then it had
Yeah.
another sequel that came out.
Stupidest shit you've ever. Yeah, and that's normal.
SteamDB, which again is not going to be all of the player base for this. It's only going to show the ones who were playing it through Steam. It was on multiple platforms. We look at the max here. It did start out with a sizable amount of community, and
That's
then it
still
degraded.
nuts.
And it had a
Remember, they said it had 12 million players. So you can't say that when the game launched in 2014 to 2015, that it had 12 million players, right? And that on Steam it only peaked at 12,236. That's not 12 million. Even if you account for Xbox One, PlayStation, and the Ubisoft store, right? Ubisoft's launcher, whatever it's called, I can't remember. Say triple the number or 4 times the number for PlayStation, 2 times the number for Xbox, and like 5 times the number for the Ubisoft. Fuck no, Steam's the most popular on PC. So half this number that's not 12 million, bro. Like, so there's 12 million copies sold, but the peak player base was clearly never 12 million, like under any circumstance. Under any circumstance. Rumbleverse was real for giving out the refunds because the game didn't last very long.
Major drop off in 2018, which is the same year that it launched a sequel. This is normal. When a sequel comes out, a lot of the player base, if the sequel doesn't suck, will move over to it. And then the servers effectively die.
Yep.
You can't run a live service game
with those numbers.
On this few players.
You can't.
You can't. Most of the time, especially not if there's anything else that goes into it. And if we go into that anything else, and we could see that there was
licensing.
So on December 14th, 2023, Ubisoft delisted The Crew and its expansions from digital platforms, suspended sales of microtransactions, and announced that the game's servers would shut down on March 30th.
A year later, dude.
So they gave them 3 months. Usually I would say, hey, 6 months is probably a better deal. But if they're going to do...
We got like a month. Rumbleverse players, we got cooked, bro. We got a fucking month. Like, we got told a month in advance. Like, there was like a bunch of murmurs and rumors like, hey, I think the game's gonna get shut down, dude. But like, from official announcement to the game actually going down, we got a month.
Do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months. The only thing that I'd be interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies.
Yep.
And a 10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years.
10 years.
And that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now, understand that's speculation, but I've seen this type of a deal many times in the industry.
Yeah, I have too. That's why I mentioned Soul Calibur. That's why I mentioned
if you're going to have to renegotiate
Mortal Kombat
on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forgo the renegotiation.
And delist the game.
If those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure. And there are some people that will say, well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you'd have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players left anyway, it makes more sense.
If it was already built in from the get-go, that they had built it as a single player experience and then coupled the online only element on top, and then they just turned off the online element and said, now this game only works offline, we have to delist it, like the licensings have ran out, blah blah blah, and then boop, they shut down the offline servers, the online servers, cool, whatever, right? But the game was never built to be single player only. The game was never built as a single player project first. That was the same thing that happened with Battleborn. Like, I understand why Battleborn shut down. It feels bad because you bought a disc of the Crew or Battleborn, but that was the way those games worked.
To just move on. I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective. And
also, your comment, yeah, I know, that's why I was saying they gave refunds, but I'm saying they didn't really have to, regardless of short lifespan. They do that whenever a game's that short. If the game's like under a year before shutdown, a lot of times they'll do refunds, except Ben and Namco, because, greedy ass company, for live service games, because it harbors negativity if you don't. Like, you get a lot of ill will from a future customer base, because now if you try another live service project, Iron Galaxy or Epic Games, or Iron Galaxy Epic Games as a couple, mainly Iron Galaxy. If Iron Galaxy ever gets a way to restart Rumbleverse and make a Rumbleverse 2, Rumbleverse Reloaded, right? Rumbleverse Remix. If they didn't give the refunds, and instead they kept that money, what would happen is people would look at the next project with skepticism. They would say, oh, well, I bought into your last project and I didn't get an experience longer than 6 months and I didn't get my money back, and you shut down the game and went completely radio silent. Like, all of those things line up to you not wanting to play their next project. Now they gave the money back and they said that, like, that harbored some goodwill. Basically, they're like, hey, we're just going to give you all the money back. We're sorry this didn't work out. We really wanted it to. We poured our blood, sweat, and tears into this shit. Stay tuned, right? And the reason why they do that is because if they ever can come up with another project or a similar project, or even re-release same said project, thank you for killing the bot, even the same project again, now you're more likely to give them your time and attention.
And I understand
and money.
People find that to be
money
from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it because I understand the burden that puts if we raise that problem in the way that we are right now. If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all,
they're not going to run live service games.
And we're going to miss out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV. And even though I don't play anymore, League of Legends.
And World of Warcraft, RuneScape.
You're talking everything.
Magic the
like
Gathering
even
Arena.
phone games, as funny as that is. A lot of people don't realize that phone games require online-only activity. What about things like Pokemon Go? What about stuff like Monster Hunter Now? What about any of these?
You
We
can't
never
have
get
those
any of them. And
because
that's why I think this needs to.
because they would have to create decoupled logic for single player proponents only eventually, or from the start, adding more resources, more dev time, more money spent, which means they have to make more money back, right? And if they do all of that, the game's less likely to be free. If you're a person who just hates live service, okay, don't play live service games. You see a game says online only, don't fucking buy it. Literally don't do it. But don't expect all games to bend to your will as a gamer, right? Games preservation, there are tons of preservable games. There are tons of games that can't be preserved. You can't preserve old MMOs. A lot of those old MMOs that never got source code released do not have some way to make private service for them. They're dead. They're gone. And they're going to stay that way.
Do not be vague. It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem. So now we're going to go to Ross, otherwise known as Accursed Farms, the creator of this initiative, and one of the ones that's pushing it the most online. I'm going to let him say exactly why he thinks that this will go through very easily and why it is important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Comes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games.
They care about all
This
media.
isn't a big consequence.
They care about
to them
all
or
media.
most of
Wait
their
a minute.
constituency.
Wait a
I'm gonna
minute.
stop it there for a moment.
Yeah.
The assertion that politicians
Everyone likes easy wins. I don't understand the politicians like easy wins. Everyone likes easy wins. Have you guys not seen the Call of Duty players are mad that their lobbies are hard and sweaty all the time and they just can't relax? Like, everyone likes easy wins. Okay. Game publishers also have more money than you, and they have lobbyists that can fight back. Is it a fucking easy win? Honestly, it's probably not an easy win. I don't know what he's talking about. But politicians care about video games because they care about all forms of media, because forms of media can either be monetized or used as media outlets that can push agendas or propaganda, things like that. Yeah, they do care about video games the same way they care about movies, the same way they care about TV shows, the same way they care about magazines. What? What? What is he talking about?
politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through. But the politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to their constituencies is incredibly absurd to me.
They have tons of lobbyists. What are you talking about?
All for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging, and it makes our entire industry look bad.
Look like a
both
joke.
On the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be
little old video games, I don't care about them.
Eventually turn into legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers and developers, and that there's some kind of a middle ground, not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care. This sets us off on a
bro smoking that good.
The law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
And that's dangerous. If we're going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law works all the way down the road, then we need to be sending the right message.
Correct.
This is sending a vague message that doesn't cover the actual problem. So this is not a win to me. This is a huge risk.
And we would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep.
You're not buying it. You're licensing it. What are you talking about? Buying and licensing are different. They're not the same.
Keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you're not buying.
You're not buying anything. You're buying a license. What are you talking about? You fucking crackhead.
That's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms.
Thank
but if we're
you.
into this weird idea that we need to get rid of all live service games.
You're tweaking. I love live service
games.
games.
In any way to keep in line with consumer policies, it is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make sense.
That's like saying if you pay for Netflix every month. Look, this is what I mean, right? If you pay for Netflix every month, you're licensing Netflix. If you stop paying for Netflix, they don't just give you your money back. Like if Netflix shuts down, they're not like, oh, here's your money back for buying Netflix for all these years. No, Netflix just shuts down. and you don't have access to the service anymore because there's no longer a license to sell you the service. It's probably aligned with other consumer practices. What the fuck?
Make a lot of sense to me. You're not buying the game, you're buying a license to the game.
Mhm.
In the niche cases where a studio is trying to sell a game as if you are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically and they give you a live service game instead, I agree that should change. That language should change. You are not purchasing the game, you are not buying the game, you are paying to have a license to a live service experience. I get that. Is that what this is doing though? The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state, which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player.
I think that if it was worded better, I would be on the side of Ross, right? Even with all of his really shitty points, I'd be on the side of Ross, right? But the problem is, like, single player games, like, it wouldn't be in line with other consumer practices when it comes to single player games, unless it's already in the licensing agreement that there is a single player component. You can play online or offline. Offline works totally decoupled from online. You don't need access to the servers. But if it's sold as a live service, that's not the case, right? So if the language was worded better, I would get rid of it. I wouldn't even worry about his bad points, because if the language was better, if it was games that have a single player proponent, games that have single player modes, even in an online only game, we would like those games now to build that single player mode first, or build that single player mode decoupled from the online, so that the game could be left in a playable state after the game is over, right? And specifically with paid games, that makes a whole lot of sense. A game like Battleborn paid. A game like The Crew paid, right? A game like RuneScape is not paid. It's free. So even if there was some sort of a single player mode, the whole fucking game is single player to me. I play by myself. That doesn't inherently make it the same, because they just gave you a product for free after they closed the doors. You never paid for a product or a service up front, right?
Call that out specifically, not this vague bullshit.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get an easy win in and we can just push it through and there won't be a lot of pushback on it.
These are
We're
really
not gonna have to think
bad
about it too hard.
points.
That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be setting precedent, if you're going to be putting
It
forward
needs to
something
be
that
for a
can
good
start
reason.
conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with the initiative, but I can't agree with you. And I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So yes, I won't agree with that. And I won't agree with Ross. There's
Yeah,
no way
that's
around it.
really bad.
I think this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative Stop Killing Games. You're not going to change my mind on it because I find this language to be incredibly vague and damaging to the rest of our industry. I think that it will be bad for both developers and players down the line in the way that it is currently written. And I think that...
Wait, hold on. Also, so if they did make all games like that, you had to leave them in a functional state, like so that there would be, like, I don't know, private servers for a multiplayer game after the fact, couldn't you just like hack and like DDoS the server of the game to make the game like unplayable or bad or like really laggy, so that the game would slowly die, and then the devs would have to cut support, and then now you could just make private servers for the game as that individual or group that like targeted the game to destroy it, and then monetize those servers, so you could just like steal. Basically, couldn't you just steal their game, right?
Starting
Like,
a conversation that doesn't get to the core of the issue is both wasted time and leads to
like I
potentially
know that that's a
bad
really
business.
cynical
So,
thing to think,
if we
but
want to talk about this,
I mean, it's
let's talk
possible,
about the
right?
actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game.
Mhm.
In reality, you're actually purchasing or buying a
A
license,
license?
to that game.
Yeah,
I
they
think
should
that
fix
we
that.
should be fighting about that. That
Mhm.
needs to go away. A
He's
player
right.
should be well informed at the point of purchase that they are purchasing a license, not buying a game. And the reason that we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions, like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheat at them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat.
Yeah, because that happened to someone in one of the Facebook groups on Tekken, right? He, I guess, was like plugging a lot or something, and that is against the rules. I don't I don't give a fuck if you think it's, oh man, it's just an online video game, bro. Like, get over it. I don't like if you think that way, cool, whatever. Other people don't. It's a whole deal. But if it's in the fucking rules that you're not supposed to disconnect constantly on purpose, and they find out you're disconnecting constantly on purpose by looking at when you disconnect, like towards the end of a match, and they can now ban you from the online. And then when you say, "Oh, I paid $70 for this game," you can't just ban me. Yes, you can. It's in the user agreement. You signed the user agreement when you chose to go online for the first time. Now, the only thing you have access to is the single player proponents of the game. Hold that shit. That's why we have licenses. That's why.
Cheat at these games. That needs to exist, but it needs to be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that. This doesn't bring that up, though. It just attacks all video games that have online-only components and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely. That doesn't make any sense to me. Aside from that, a lot of people really like live service games.
I do.
As they exist now. So trying to kill off all
I do.
live service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They are about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this as why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think that the government
I think video games make more money than movies now, right?
Flaws and holes is absurd. So I don't think that's
Video game
honest at
industry
all.
is bigger
I
than
find it
the
disgusting.
movie
So for
industry.
everyone who's mad about that, fine. Be angry about it. I'm not going to change my stance on that because I can't agree with this, both as a dev and a player. I see the danger involved, I see the vagueness in the language, and it doesn't make sense to me. If we want to fight for better conditions for players, then fight the actual problem. Don't make new ones.
I love that. I love that. That's, yeah, okay. But we got to watch, I wouldn't be surprised if it were. I think it is. I think it's slightly bigger than the, like, because movies you have to pay for, right? You have to think about there's number 2. You have to pay for movies, but you don't have to pay for some video games. There's a lot of video games that are completely free and make billions of dollars. I'm looking at you, Genshin Impact, right? Like games like Genshin Impact are free to try, free to play, but have good monetization or good schemes to monetize their games. Games like Fortnite, games like Call of Duty Warzone, games like Honkai Star Rail, things like that. Like those games make tons of money and cost $0 to try. I have to pay $11 to go to the movies. Some places the theater's more than that. Some places the theaters are $15, $20, $25. But people aren't going to do that. Okay, let's watch number 2.
Hi, my name is Jason Thorhall, also known as Pirate Suffer, and the other day I put out a video called
Genshin is a better casino than actual casinos. Real.
Support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive. The analytics on it show that people really think it's a good idea. There's a huge amount of like ratio, and I received hundreds of comments from developers thanking me for putting it out because they can't speak publicly while they're at a business or a job elsewhere. A lot of the times, major companies will fire you if you are speaking out of turn and cause a PR disaster for those companies. And since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything.
They can't,
so I am.
because then they look like a shitty dev. They look like an asshole. Yeah.
Which is games have to be left in a functional, playable state. Now, what happens if that game is a online-only live service game? Well, if you want that to stay in a functional, playable state, that means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now. Some way to keep it functional and playable, right? Now, many of you are requesting, yes, I should get the server binaries so that I can go and make private servers for this. But that doesn't make a lot of sense in the real world. And the reason why is because it leaves developers open to abuse. So let's explore that a little bit.
Hey, what leaves developers open to abuse? I feel like I mentioned this at the in the end of the last video, right? Like, I make a new battle royale. Okay, it's called Spellbound Arena, and it's like a magic-based, mid-rangey, like kind of fighting, but also slightly shooting battle royale. where you're using magical abilities to fight each other in an arena that slowly collapses, right? And is ever changing because of magic, right? Mountains are created, rivers, and all that. So it's like an procedurally generated arenas. Ooh, yeah, it might be so good at game design. Anyways, I don't put in a good enough anti-cheat. I'm using Vanguard. I think I'm using the greatest anti-cheat to ever exist. People start using hacks in my game. They start cheating. They start using the boulder push from all the way across the map. They start teleporting behind players and using the toxic sludge to instantly kill them, right? Players get really mad and say that the game is bad. The game is filled with hackers and cheaters. They start DDoSing my servers, and then all the games are filled with lag. So no one wants to play my game anymore. It was free to play. I can't further monetize because no one wants to pay for anything because I can't fix the problem, and I have to shut down my studio. The people who now DDoSed my game, who now abused me, I released the server binaries because I love the game and I just want people to be able to enjoy it, and I hope the cheating problem goes away. Here you go. Enjoy the server binaries. Make yourselves some private servers. The main private server comes from the person who DDoSed me and hacked my game to an unplayable state, and they monetize it. Does that ring a bell? Does that sound like what he's about to say? Let's see.
It's something else, right? And let's say that I want to monetize that game. But
I missed it. He's right.
Let's say that you made your own video game and you made a live service game. Maybe it's an MMO, maybe it's something else, right? And let's say that I want to monetize that game, but you don't allow monetization of the game by any other party. This makes sense because most creators don't allow for
fucking ransom shit.
Just take
I'm a cynic.
And profit off of it.
I'm a cynic,
right? So then I go, well, how am I going to force you to do this? Under this initiative, you would have to release the server binaries or keep the game in a functional playable state at end of life. So I hit you with a ton of bots. I hit you with a ton of exploits. I attack your community. I destroy your Reddit. I go after your business. I go everywhere that I possibly can to make this cost as much as it possibly can for you.
So that you have to shut
down. It's not hard to
down.
do this. We saw the exact same thing happen in
Titanfall?
TF2 recently.
Oh,
the massive
TF2.
amount of bots that were attacking the game. This is not
Oh.
feasible. This is something that is very easily attainable today. And let's say that this goes on long enough that your game dies because you can't afford it anymore, and your studio has to shut down. At end of life, you now have to release those server binaries to keep the game in a functional playable state. At which point I take those, I create a private server, and
you monetize
Some
it.
people have said, well, simply don't allow monetization of the server. Well, who's going to enforce that?
Enforce
if
it.
you want a government
The
initiative
original
to enforce
developer's
that means
dead.
The government has to build a registry of all of those games and all of that intellectual property that shouldn't be monetized, and then somehow enforce that with no one owning it because those studios have shut down.
Thank you.
That's going to be a massive burden. On top of that, if you want to go the other route and say the company has to go and control it, well, what if the company's not around anymore? Is that just able to be monetized now? Again, this was obtained through abuse of the original creator. I don't think that's a good route. And this scenario gets even worse if you do allow monetization, because now I can just kill off your company and then monetize the server and no one will ever come after me. Now it's even more of a problem. So allowing monetization of this work is strictly worse. And for
I
those of
hate
you
that
out
I
there who
called
say, "Oh,
that."
this can be done right now. I could
Yes,
just
it-
destroy your studio and take your stuff anyway. You could, but this allows a route for it to be legal. To do
Yeah,
so.
now you can
That's
do
the
it
problem.
legally.
After putting this out publicly and talking to people about it, this specific scenario on both YouTube and Discord and Reddit and a bunch of other locations, I got a couple of takes back. We're going to start with the most extreme position and kind of go from there. So in the most extreme, people said live service games shouldn't exist at all, and the initiative will kill them off for good, and that's a good thing.
You're an
Well,
idiot if you
don't
think
get to
that.
define what players get to play or not play.
Yeah, like as someone who likes live service games, I don't tell people who like and play single player games like, wow, you like bad games. You pay $70 for your game. What an idiot. You're so stupid. I'm like, I wouldn't pay $70 for that. I'm like, I'm not paying $70 for a fighting game in 2024. What the hell? Right? Like, I'm not doing that. Right? Most experiences that I get from video games aren't single player experiences, really, right? There's a few single player games I would love to play or that I do play. Mostly now I just want to enjoy indies. But in those big single player games, in those non-live service games, if someone enjoys those, you can enjoy those. I say you paid $70 for this shit, like jokingly, we're friends. But normally I'm not gonna tell people that. I don't care. Enjoy what you want to enjoy. Gaming is a medium in which many people have ways to enjoy it. Marianne likes Animal Crossing. Do I like Animal Crossing? No. My Animal Crossing is RuneScape. I'm gonna go play RuneScape. She's gonna play Animal Crossing. We get the same kind of cozy feeling and enjoyment, but from completely different games. And I don't knock her playing Animal Crossing. You see how that works? But I wouldn't say Animal Crossing is a bad game and it shouldn't exist, so I want to stop Animal Crossing from existing and like create an initiative that says start killing video games, right? Like I'm not going to make that initiative. That's silly.
You also
Because that's
shouldn't
what
be
the
able to
other
define
hand
what
of this coin
developers
is.
build or don't build. You should
The
not
other
have
head
creative
of this
control
coin.
over the developers, and you should not have control over what is in my Steam library or on my phone. That doesn't make any
Real.
goddamn sense. Aside from that, the initiative does not purport to kill live service games. It would just make it incredibly difficult to build said games and add a lot of risk to it.
Animal
which
Crossing is
why
a
I
bad
bring
game and it
this
shouldn't
up
exist, so I'm
and
going
why
to
I don't
stop it from
support the initiative
existing.
in the first
Loads
place.
gun.
A lot of people don't realize that this will slowly diminish live service games in the market because it's not an incentive for us to build them anymore, which means you get less multiplayer live experiences. That sucks. I like live service games. I enjoy playing things like Final.
Like, say you like live service multiplayer games, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna name a bunch of live service multiplayer games, and tell me you haven't enjoyed one of these in your lifetime, because they would go away. They'd be really hard to make or monetize in this initiative now, without either giving away trade secrets or releasing server binaries or some other risk like abuse of your studio happening. Call of Duty Warzone, Overwatch 2, Apex Legends, CSGO, CS2, Rainbow Six Siege, the finals, Fortnite, right? And we could just keep going. Like, there's so many.
Final Fantasy 14. I enjoy going and playing in games in the past.
Paladins, yeah.
Like League of Legends. These are games that are live service. They require a live service to run. And you shouldn't be able to take that away from people. And if that's your only position on this, not only are you disingenuous in what the initiative is purporting to try and achieve, but you're also aggressively attacking other players
games, yeah.
instead of trying to fix something. So the next one is that this is about games preservation and that it needs to happen to preserve these types of games for future generations and for everyone to always have forever. But I would argue,
Look, dog, I don't want a fucking online multiplayer shooter hobbling along with 8 players in a private server, bro. Like, if the game died, it probably died because it wasn't played anymore because people didn't like it, more than likely, right? Like, let's be honest, I love Rumbleverse and I think it's gone too soon. But did it have a lot of players? Probably not if it died as fast as it did, right? Like, not only do I think that it wasn't making enough money for Epic Games, right? And for a long time, I was like, Epic Games is like, they have fucking Epic Games has Fortnite, so they're expecting Fortnite numbers from Rumbleverse, and that's just not fair. No, they were probably just expecting reasonable numbers, and I bet you it was way below reasonable numbers, right? It's a battle royale fighting game. It's a platform fighter. It's a platform arena fighter mixed with a battle royale and like platforming elements. That's weird. It's a lot of like niche elements all thrown into one game that are gonna alienate some players and create a really niche player base, right? That game was probably hobbling along. Let's be honest. So if you make private servers for the game will just continue to hobble along and will never be the best version of itself because its best version of itself was that Prime Day 1. I don't want Paladins to stay online with 16 players worldwide. If the game's ready to go, it's an old man, it's limping along. That's not how it should work. Maybe
that this isn't
Maybe it was out of its
actually
time.
preserving these games. Social games, such as, let's say, Apex Legends.
Yeah, there are social games. That's a
require
good way to
number
think of them.
players to be in the match at the same time so that you can have an experience that is only able to be obtained through lots of players interacting, right? It's a multiplayer game. You need a bunch of people. How many of you have felt negatively when an MMO dies or when a live service game dies? Oh, dead game. There's only 5 people online. Why
Yep.
would I play that? So why would you want to preserve a game in that state?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me. You want to take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple
5
of
people?
You're
Why?
not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is. You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's not preservation. And for those that may stop there and go, but private servers going to have a lot of players. Look at all the ones for World of Warcraft. Again, we talked about that. It opens up a route for abuse of the developers. So that is not a solution. And the last take that I got from this is, and it's the most reasonable to me, this is an initiative. It's not a law. Why are you upset? Just wait. I'm not going to wait. And the reason I'm not going to wait
You need
is
to talk
because
about
I
it
see
now.
the start of this conversation not making sense. It's not including the actual developer
Problem
side of the
either.
conversation. It's not showing the trials.
Bro, quoted you directly. Oh, dead game. Yeah.
Side of the gaming industry
Quoted
for
every
people who are
gamer
actually
directly.
making
Oh,
the
dead
games
game.
in play. I don't have any reason to be quiet about that. And many other developers aren't going to be able to speak on this. As I explained before, it's really easy to lose your job if you're working at a major studio and try to speak out of turn on something like this, especially with something people are so passionate about. Doesn't make any sense to stay quiet. And it also doesn't make any sense to wait until it's in a different form when I see that it has so many
He
problems.
watches
with
your
the
streams.
language
Yeah, probably
as it
not.
is currently
This
written.
guy has no idea who I am.
should
I'm
be
farming
able
him,
to be
though.
talking about
Get
this.
farmed.
In fact, I should be talking about this. I am a content creator specifically that is a game developer that has worked in this industry for 20 years. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I do. So for those who are calling for me to just be silent and sit in the corner, no. With all of that being said, I do think there's a consumer protection thing that we can fix here. It's just not really what the initiative is about. I think that if you're going to buy a live service game, you shouldn't be told you're buying the game. You shouldn't be told that you're purchasing the game.
You should be told you're purchasing
explicitly
a
that
license.
You are purchasing a license
Correct.
to that game. The reason why is because that license needs to be revoked anytime that you are cheating at the game and damaging the play experience of other players. While this is written in the TOS and the EULA, it's usually not clearly defined.
It's
at point
very
of sale.
hidden.
Or
Yeah.
they throw a giant TOS in front of you and
And you
it doesn't
don't fucking
really do
read it,
anything because
yeah.
people skip past it. If at point of sale it says specifically, there's specific language stating that you are either leasing or purchasing a license or anything
Morning.
along those lines, that you're not actually buying the game directly, I think it would go a long way to informing
Correct.
consumers of what they're doing and protect them from some of these business practices that they didn't realize they were engaging in. That makes a lot more sense to me than force all developers to leave the game in a functional, playable state. And that's about it. That's all I really wanted to talk about with this. I hope that's clarified some things for some of you and some of the dangers that this can cause as it is currently written. If you're still mad about this, not much I can do about it. Outside of that, I'm going to be gone for the next 4 days, so if you expect me to respond or anything like that and you think I'm ducking the issue or hiding in some way, I'm not. I'm just in Vegas because there's DEF CON going on, which is a hacking convention, and it's the first vacation I've had in 5 years. I can't wait to see my friends out there. So with that in mind, see y'all later.
Okay. Yeah, I mess with that. I rock with that. I think that's really good. Like the biggest thing that I was worried about was like abuse of developers. That's true. I don't think that it should be legalized to basically kill off a studio and monetize their game because they didn't monetize it, right? Like you release all the source code or you release all of the assets for the game and the binaries for the server, and then you make private server because a game developer didn't make private server, and I made their game bad so that they'd have to shut down. I made all the costs of trying to fix their game too high for them to afford, whether it's a giant company, a really big one, or whether it's a smaller company, right? Like that just leads to less companies wanting to take the risk of creating a live service game. And I don't want that because live service games are the easiest way right now for a lot of people to get into video games. You know how hard it is for kids to justify, especially middle class and like lower class, like lower middle class and maybe even impoverished kids to get their parents to agree to spend $70 on a game every 3 or 4 months when they can just say, hey, mom, can I download Fortnite? And Fortnite's free. Like, okay, well, how much does Fortnite cost, Timmy? And Timmy says to the mom, free. And she's like, yeah, you can download Fortnite. Okay. Mom, can I play Apex Legends? I don't have any money, Timmy. You can't play Apex Legends. No, mom, it doesn't cost anything. It's free. Okay, Timmy, you can play Apex Legends. Those experiences go away if you create an initiative like this and let it pass into law, knowing that there's other issues at play. I don't like that. The language is too vague. I think if we made it so that it's only targeting games with a single player proponent or that could be single player because the online functionality doesn't really add that much to a game like GTA, for instance, right? GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2, they work perfectly offline. They are full single-player experiences offline. If GTA 5 went offline right now and the game stopped working completely, it would make no sense because GTA 5 was built before GTA Online. Red Dead Redemption 2 was built before Red Dead Redemption Online. If they coupled them together, it would make no sense at all. If Elden Ring stopped working when you didn't have an internet connection, it would make no sense at all, right? Or if they decided to shut down the servers, like, I don't know, From Software shut down all their servers for everything, and Elden Ring stopped working, it wouldn't make any sense. But a game like Fortnite, Roblox, Apex Legends doing the same, League of Legends doing the same, I can't see a world where that makes sense. I agree with Pirate Software. I agree with Pirate Software even as someone who kind of believes in the idea of games preservation, but not nearly as much as other people do. We don't have as much physical media now, and as you guys can tell, physical media doesn't even stop people from not reading license agreements because people don't read. People don't want to think. You buy the disc and you think, yep, this game's preserved. It's not preserved. It actually works better when you're offline. Look at that. Tons of games work better when you're offline. If you don't like live service games, go play those.